Hey everybody, this is Christina Williams with Just Criminal Law, and today we're going to talk about domestic violence and the other side of the story that people a lot of times don't get to hear. To facilitate me in this conversation or discussion, I have David Mann here today, and David is a legal consultant that our firm has been working with for the past year. He helps lawyers with their messaging, making sure that both sides of the story are told fairly and simply.
That's right, Christy. I help lawyers get the story of their client told clearly and accurately, which is a great segue into what we're talking about today, domestic violence cases. So when the police are called to a domestic violence dispute, they show up and then somebody has to tell them the story of what happened, right? And I imagine both sides are trying to tell the story of what happened, but are you seeing in your practice, working with defending people who've been accused of this, are you seeing that, one side tends to be believed more than the other?
Sure. There's always that problem with these type of cases where only one side is believed in the beginning, and that's the alleged victim side of the story. And so obviously when people come to me, they're really frustrated and worried because their side didn't come out in the report.
Okay, so if we just walk through sort of what happens here, a couple gets into a dispute that's personal to them, and it's happening inside their own house or something, and then they call the police and the police come. Well, what makes this a domestic violence dispute versus any other kind of dispute?
One of the parties who, is calling the police reports that they've been touched in, a rude or angry manner.
So the officer shows up to the scene of this domestic violence, and I imagine the person that called the officer is dying to tell their side of the story, so they're probably talking, and the other side is trying to tell their side of the story, and the whole thing is happening at the same time, and the officer has to sort through all this, right?
Right. I mean, that's typically how it starts. One side of the story is told to the police, and then the other person tells their side of the story, and they try to sort out who's the one who's most responsible for this.
All right. And so then what happens?
Well, it's a matter of public policy now, or a matter of policy with law enforcement, that one of the two parties is going to jail.
Okay, so as soon as someone calls the police and that officer comes to the scene and evaluates this, someone's going to jail, right?
Yes.
Wow. So it really comes down to whoever tells the strongest story is probably going to be the most convincing.
Right. And it a lot of times comes down to, who was better at, telling their side of the story. I don't necessarily recommend that people make a statement to police, and then we're allowed to sort it out later. But that decision is based largely on whoever says the other one was the worst of the two. Okay,
so once all of this is sized up, the officer has to do some sort of investigation, right? And it sounds like maybe that investigation, isn't always done as well as it could be, or maybe it's a little superficial. Or tell me a little bit about what goes into the police looking into the facts of the case.
Sure. So police very quickly assess who they think is probably going to jail, and the investigation quickly turns in that person's favor. So a lot of times the police report's heavily weighted with facts and evidence.
Okay, so this report that the police does, is this a fair report?
No, absolutely not. It's heavily weighted on the side of whoever the alleged victim is, and it's not, both sides aren't presented in the report. It's definitely one-sided.
So when someone is accused of domestic violence, they're now in the position of being a defendant in a case, and it sounds like it's, complicated to get the story told. But it sounds also like maybe this is something someone might think they can do themselves because it's just telling a story. But talk a little bit about how important it is to really tell the right story.
Right. Absolutely. You want to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward and your version of the story that is most relevant, most important. And that's, the job that your attorney needs to help you with.
So I'm sure there's lots of defense attorneys that can help people with these kinds of disputes, but you have people designated to do your own investigation, right?
Sure. We have a full-time investigator. A lot of times we do have to go out and talk to witnesses ourselves because, law enforcement didn't do it. Look through phone records, text messages, all kinds of, supporting evidence that just was ignored or wasn't gathered.
Wow, this is so interesting how important it is to get the full story told. And sometimes it sounds like the whole system, from the police report to the way people think, sort of might be a little, heavily weighted on the side of the other party, the party who is making the accusation. So if someone wants to get a hold of you to help them out, how do they do that?
Well, we'll include a link to our website in the description, and someone can call, text, or visit with a member of my team anytime. And, it's just really important that they get the right attorney. You only get one shot at justice. So get us involved, make that count.